Yeah, so I'll be scuffing the surface, cleaning and scuffing the surface with 80 grit sandpaper, and that'll give a good texture for the epoxy to grab onto. But I'll do a clear coat of epoxy, let that gel, and then I will apply a mixture of epoxy and 407 low density fairing filler, and we'll get this board faired. You can see the rough texture of when I sandblasted it. Just all the pits, all the material loss here. So we'll fill this back in. Once I get it faired, I'm going to go ahead and there's a technique from the Mariner forums about using wax paper around the entire perimeter and taping it on the underside, and then having a epoxy with filler all around the edge, and then you fold over the wax paper and it creates a nice little bead all the way around the edge. And you still have to sand it and shape it, but that'll help clean up the edges. But once that is all done, I think at that point I'm going to go ahead and weigh it and see how much weight is actually lost. There's a couple things I am considering. I don't know if it's really necessary. One thing is adding some tape on the front, or some fabric on the front of fiberglass to give a nice little layer for impact damage. Some of the areas I want to sail, oyster beds are quite prevalent, so it'd just be nice to have another little sacrificial layer before it gets down into the fairing compound, epoxy, and the POR 15, which is this black coating here. Most people don't do it, and supposedly it interferes with the Mariner class racing rules somehow, but I was trying to get more details on that, and it seems like the details are a little slim, but it's somewhere in the forums where I came across something. But it'd be nice to have some protection on the leading edge of the centerboard. Also, if it's really underweight, I may consider techniques of adding and laminating in some weight, maybe like some lead down here at the lower end and glassing that in. I don't know if that's really gonna be necessary. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. But a lot of others, when they have this bad pitting, they do lose a lot of weight on the boards. Originally, I believe they are 165 pounds. So we'll see. Obviously, I'm adding material back on between the paint and the fairing compound and the epoxy. So we'll see how much is actually lost. Definitely am expecting weight loss. But if it's not too bad, I won't even worry about it. So I'll weigh it, get some opinions on, the weight through the Mariner forums, and we'll go from there. So, all right, I'm gonna clean this, sand it, and get the epoxy started, or at least get it prepped for this afternoon. So right now it's a little too cool for it. It should warm up in the afternoon. So, all right, back to work. Okay, I've just layered the centerboard in epoxy, and once it gets tacky, gels over, I'm going to go ahead and mix in the fairing filler in with the West System Epoxy, and then I'll go ahead and fair over this. So I had a couple of issues. I started sanding with 80 grit sandpaper, and some of the high spots started to reveal metal rather quickly. I had 2 coats of POR 15, so I switched over to a steel wire brush, and it ended up scratching the whole surface until it was dull, to give a good texture for the epoxy to stick to. And once I layered over the epoxy, I found that there are some spots where the epoxy was opening up and revealing a dry surface, like the surface tension of the epoxy was pulling it away. So I went ahead and got the steel wire brush again and treated it as though it were just a bare metal surface, and rubbed it around, hopefully scratching it into the surface so we get some better adherence. Hopefully this works out well. I had debated the high spots that revealed metal. I debated doing another layer of POR 15. I just didn't want to set back the time frame. 99.9% of the surface was covered. I figured the epoxy is going to seal it up anyway, so I just went ahead and moved forward. Hopefully in the long run that turns out to be a good decision. We'll find out in a few years probably. So yeah, once this gets tacky, I'll go ahead and fair it, and to have a nice surface, and then once that's cured, I'll flip it over, repeat the process on the other side. Once that is done, I will then go ahead and fair up the edges. We'll get to that, but basically we'll make a mold with wax paper, kind of folding it over and holding the epoxy mixture up against the edges, and then that'll be faired. Once that's done, I will either move forward with painting or work on getting a new bushing for the pivot pin to go through, but that'll be a different project. So as long as we're making progress on this and getting it out of the way, it's all that matters. So all right, back to work.
So I ended up applying 2 full coats of the low density fairing filler and epoxy on either side, and I did end up doing a 3rd coat, but it was very light just to touch up some areas. Um, I do expect to do a fair amount of sanding. There's definitely a lot of material that went on. I just wanted to make sure that I've got a good layer of material in between the seawater and that iron centerboard. So I'll double check the dimensions before it ends up going back into the centerboard trunk, back into the boat. The edges still need to be done. So that will be the next project on the centerboard. I did run out of the low density fairing filler. I think the container bought was 4 or 5 ounces or so, and I used that entire brand new container on this project alone. And I feel like I went a little bit light. I feel like maybe my fairing compound was a little bit on the loose side. Hopefully that ends up being okay. The areas I did sand, it did seem to sand pretty well, so hopefully that's all right. But man, it takes a lot of filler, a lot of powder to make this material. So I was very surprised there. So I'll be ordering, I believe it's a 12-ounce container, because I still need to do the edges on this. And then, of course, there's going to be a lot of fairing on the boat itself. So, yeah, thanks for following Project Seahorse, and look forward to sharing some more progress with you guys. I have some other projects I need to throw the videos together to show some updates. So I'm pretty excited about that, about how much progress I've actually made here. I did start a new job, so unfortunately progress might start slowing down just a little bit, but I think I'm still actually on schedule for sailing in the spring. So, all right, thanks a lot, everyone.